Welcome back to Math Maintenance. We have talked about triangles, but today we are going to talk about quadrilaterals. So a quadrilateral just means that it has four. So quad is the prefix that means four, which means any shape that has four sides or four angles is termed as a quadrilateral. Now we can break that down and come up with other examples of quadrilaterals that have more known features. So quadrilateral again just means four sides and four angles that are coming together. If we want to get more specific about those things, we can do that by using some of these other names. So for example, in a parallelogram has to have two sets of parallel sides. So I can draw two lines that are parallel, and they're the same length, so that when I make my other two lines parallel, it makes a parallelogram. Parallelogram, two sets of parallel sides. This does mean that a rectangle is an example of a parallelogram, and a square is an example of a parallelogram because it has two sets of parallel sides. It also means that I could make a parallelogram that's really, really skinny with really acute angles and really obtuse angles. So parallelograms can look all different, but not as different as our general definition of quadrilateral. We're getting a little bit more specific because we're saying that two sets of the sides have to be parallel. In a trapezoid, only one set has to be parallel. So the typical example of a trapezoid would be this shape. I have one set of sides that are parallel, and then the other set is doing their own thing. Trapezoids could be really tall and pointy or really wide and thin. This one kind of looks like a volcano ready to erupt, but I just have one set of parallel sides. Trapezoids have one set, parallelograms have both sets. When I get to a rhombus, I'm getting even more specific because in a rhombus, all four sides have to be of equal length. So not only are the sides parallel to each other, they are now of equal length. A rectangle is not an example of a rhombus because the sides aren't of equal length. A square is a special example of a rhombus because all four sides are of equal length. A square is the most specific of our quadrilateral. It has the most rules that it has to follow. In a square, we have two sets of sides that are parallel. We have all four sides being the same length, and we have all four angles being right angles. And if you remember from our triangle conversation, a right angle means 90 degrees. So a square is the most specific type of quadrilateral we can talk about. It has the most rules it has to follow before we can call it a square. In your packet today, you have a sheet that looks like this. It says quadrilateral classification. You're going to look at the shape on the page, and then you're going to look at the name that is labeled on that shape. If it's correct, so it's saying this is a trapezoid, that is in fact a trapezoid, you're going to color it green. If it's not correct, for example, it's saying this is a square, that's not a square, so you would color it orange. Down below, it asks you to draw your own example of three things: a parallelogram, a rhombus, and a rectangle. For your manipulative practice today, I want you to continue on with those multiplication flashcards. Like I said, it's super important that you get those down really, really well so that as you move on to other things in math, harder problems become easier because you know your facts so well. Your digital practice for today is to compare two sides of an equation and determine whether they are equal. So it might say something like 3 plus 3 equals 7 minus 1. you would solve the left side and get 6. You would solve the right side and get 6. And so this statement would get moved into the true column on the document. If it said something like 2 times 4 equals 8 plus 2, well, 2 times 4 is 8, 8 plus 2 is 10. This statement would get slid into the false column on the document. Good luck practicing your quadrilaterals, your multiplication, and telling whether two sides of a number sentence are equal to one another.